Before you decide this message isn't about you, let me ask you something. What if the next 3 days carry a kind of heightened attention? The exact window where the small, easily missed signals your mind usually filters out suddenly become impossible to overlook. What if the psychologist Carl Jung, over a century ago, was already describing exactly this phenomenon, not as prophecy, but as a real, observable pattern in how the human psyche prepares itself for significant connection before that connection becomes visible in the external world? Most people think of psychological insight and romantic timing as belonging to entirely separate categories, one clinical and intellectual, the other emotional and unpredictable. But Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists in history, spent much of his career studying exactly the kind of meaningful coincidence, inner readiness, and unconscious pull that many people today associate with the arrival of a significant soulmate connection. He gave this phenomenon a specific name, synchronicity, meaningful coincidence that cannot be explained through ordinary cause and effect alone, but that nonetheless carries genuine psychological significance for the person experiencing it. Right now, if you've been noticing an unusual intensity of attention towards signs, symbols, and small meaningful coincidences, this may reflect exactly the kind of psychological state Jung described as preceding significant, unconscious material finally becoming conscious, and, often, visible in external life circumstances as well. This is not a claim that a specific person will appear in exactly 72 hours as though following a scheduled appointment. It is an invitation to understand a real psychological framework, one Jung spent decades developing, that explains why periods of heightened inner readiness so often precede noticeable shifts in outer circumstance, sometimes within a strikingly short window of time once that inner readiness fully develops. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear draws directly from Jung's actual work on synchronicity, the Anima and Animus, and the process of individuation, concepts that offer genuine, substantive insight into the connection between inner psychological readiness and the arrival of significant relationship in a person's life. Have you noticed an unusual increase in meaningful coincidence recently? Numbers, names, symbols that seem to repeat with more frequency than usual? Jung would have taken this pattern seriously, not as superstition, but as psychologically significant information worth genuine attention. Carl Jung developed the concept of synchronicity to describe meaningful coincidences that occur without any direct causal connection, but that nonetheless carry genuine psychological significance for the person experiencing them. Jung was a serious clinical psychologist, and he did not propose this concept casually. He observed it repeatedly in his clinical work, noticing that patients often experience meaningful external events that closely mirrored significant internal psychological processes they were actively working through, occurring with a frequency and precision that seemed to exceed what ordinary chance would predict. Importantly, Jung did not describe synchronicity as evidence of a predetermined, fixed fate operating independently of a person's own psychological state. He understood it as evidence of a deep connection between the inner and outer worlds, one where significant internal psychological shifts, movement toward wholeness, resolution of internal conflict, integration of previously unconscious material, often coincide with meaningful external events that seem to reflect or confirm that same internal process. This framework offers a genuinely useful lens for understanding why periods of significant personal growth or psychological integration so often coincide with notable shifts in a person's external circumstances, including romantic circumstances. It is not that the universe is arbitrarily rewarding good behavior. It is that significant internal shifts change how a person perceives, engages with, and moves through their external environment, often in ways that produce genuinely different external results that can feel remarkably well-timed precisely because they are connected to real, significant internal change rather than occurring in isolation from it. If you've been engaged in genuine internal work, examining old patterns, working through significant personal history, developing a clearer sense of your own identity and values, Jung's framework suggests that this internal process may indeed be approaching a point of significant integration, a point that often coincides with noticeable external shifts, including, for many people, meaningful developments in their romantic life. Among Jung's most significant and enduring contributions to understanding romantic attraction is his concept of the Anima and Animus, archetypal inner figures representing the unconscious feminine aspect within men and the unconscious masculine aspect within women, aspects of the psyche that Jung believed play a significant role in shaping who a person finds themselves drawn to romantically. Jung proposed that much of the initial, intense attraction people experience toward a romantic partner involves a process of projection, unconsciously perceiving qualities of one's own inner anima or animus onto another person, experiencing that person as uniquely compelling because they seem to embody these significant inner qualities, even though much of what feels so magnetic about them initially reflects internal psychological material being projected outward, rather than purely objective qualities belonging to the other person alone. This concept helps explain why early romantic attraction often feels so intensely significant, sometimes disproportionately so relative to how well two people actually know each other. It also helps explain why genuine, Lasting relationship requires a person to eventually withdraw some of this projection, to see their partner as a genuine, separate individual rather than purely a reflection of their own inner anima or animus, a process Jung considered essential for developing mature, sustainable love rather than a relationship built primarily on unconscious projection alone. Understanding this framework offers meaningful insight into the process of preparing for genuine romantic connection. As a person does the work of integrating their own anima or animus consciously, becoming more whole and less dependent on external projection to access these significant inner qualities, they often become considerably more capable of genuine, mature romantic connection, rather than the more volatile, intensely projective attraction that characterizes less psychologically integrated romantic experience. If you've been doing genuine inner work toward this kind of integration, becoming more whole and complete within yourself rather than searching for a partner primarily to complete you, Jung's framework suggests you may be approaching considerably greater readiness for the kind of mature, sustainable connection that reflects genuine partnership between two whole individuals, rather than the less stable dynamic that purely projective attraction tends to produce. Jung's concept of individuation, the lifelong process of integrating various aspects of the unconscious psyche into a coherent, whole sense of self, offers perhaps the most significant framework for understanding genuine readiness for lasting romantic partnership. Jung believed that psychological wholeness, achieved through the ongoing process of individuation, was essential not only for individual well-being, but for the capacity to engage in genuinely mature relationship with another person. A person who has not yet done significant work toward individuation often approaches relationship from a place of seeking completion externally, looking for a partner to fill significant internal gaps or unresolved psychological material, a dynamic that tends to produce relationships characterized by significant instability, since no external partner can genuinely resolve internal psychological work that has not yet been consciously undertaken. As individuation progresses, a person becomes increasingly capable of approaching relationship from a place of genuine wholeness, seeking partnership not to complete an internal deficiency, but to share an already substantially whole life with another similarly whole individual. Jung considered this shift essential for genuinely mature, sustainable love, distinguishing it clearly from the less stable, more anxious, or dependent dynamics that characterize relationships formed primarily around unconscious and integrated psychological need. If you have been engaged in significant work toward this kind of psychological integration, therapy, deep self-reflection, honest confrontation with your own patterns and unconscious material, you may indeed be approaching a significant point of readiness for genuine, mature partnership, readiness that, consistent with Jung's own observations about synchronicity, often coincides with noticeable external developments in romantic circumstances, sometimes with a timing that feels remarkably significant precisely because it reflects real, substantial internal change rather than arbitrary chance. It's worth addressing directly something important about specific timeframes like the 72 hours referenced in this message framing. Jung's actual work never claimed the ability to predict a specific romantic arrival within an exact number of hours, and no genuine psychological framework can honestly make that kind of precise, literal prediction. What Jung's work does support is a more nuanced, genuinely useful idea, that periods of significant internal integration often produce a noticeably heightened window of attention, perception, and receptivity, a period where meaningful synchronicities, opportunities, and significant developments become considerably more likely to be both noticed and acted upon, precisely because internal readiness has reached a significant point of culmination. This heightened window may indeed feel like it's unfolding over a compressed period, sometimes days rather than weeks or months, particularly following a significant internal breakthrough or the completion of substantial psychological work. But treating this as a literal, precise countdown to a specific external event risks creating unnecessary anxiety or unrealistic expectation, rather than reflecting the genuine, more nuanced psychological process Jung's actual work describes. The honest, useful takeaway from this framework is not a literal prediction requiring you to anxiously watch the clock over the next 3 days. It is a genuine invitation to notice whether you are currently experiencing this kind of heightened window, increased synchronicity, a felt sense of significant internal integration reaching completion, and to engage with that noticing thoughtfully and with genuine presence, rather than either dismissing it entirely or treating it as a literal, guaranteed timeline for a specific external outcome. Drawing from Jung's genuine framework, there are specific, recognizable signs that may indicate you're currently experiencing this kind of significant psychological integration and heightened receptivity, worth paying attention to with honest, grounded reflection. An increase in noticing meaningful coincidence, related specifically to themes of love, partnership, or wholeness, rather than a generalized increase in noticing coincidence across every area of life, often indicates that your unconscious is actively processing significant material related to romantic readiness specifically. Jung would have considered this pattern worth genuine attention, evidence of unconscious material actively moving toward conscious integration. A felt sense of increased wholeness or completeness within yourself, separate from any specific relationship circumstance, often indicates meaningful progress in the individuation process Jung considered essential for genuine romantic readiness. This might show up as reduced anxiety about being single, a settled sense of contentment with your own company, or a general feeling that you are approaching relationship from a place of genuine desire to share your life rather than desperate need to complete it. Increased clarity about your own values, patterns, and what genuine partnership actually requires, rather than continued confusion or anxious searching for external answers, often indicates that significant internal integration has genuinely progressed, exactly the kind of psychological development Jung associated with genuine readiness for mature, lasting connection. If you're noticing these patterns together, meaningful synchronicity specifically related to love and partnership, a felt sense of increased internal wholeness, and genuine clarity about your own patterns and values, this convergence suggests you may indeed be in a significant period of psychological readiness, one that, consistent with Jung's own observations, often coincides with meaningful developments in external romantic circumstances. It's worth being genuinely honest about something important: the value of engaging with Jung's actual psychological framework, individuation, integration of the anima or animus, genuine synchronicity, holds significant meaning and benefit regardless of the exact timing of any specific romantic development. This work fundamentally changes your relationship with yourself and your capacity for genuine, mature partnership, benefits that remain valuable and significant independent of whether a specific person appears within any particular time frame, 72 hours, or otherwise. Continuing to engage in genuine psychological integration, becoming increasingly whole and less dependent on external partnership to feel complete, serves you profoundly regardless of the specific external timeline your romantic life ultimately follows. It is worth remembering that Jung's own work emphasized this process as a lifelong journey rather than a single, discrete event with a precise, predictable conclusion. Approaching your own individuation and readiness for love with this same patient, genuine understanding, rather than anxious focus on a specific, literal countdown, honors both the actual depth of Jung's psychological insight and your own genuine well-being throughout this ongoing process. If you've been noticing heightened synchronicity, a growing sense of internal wholeness, or increased clarity about your own patterns and values, understand that these genuinely may indicate significant psychological readiness for meaningful, lasting partnership, readiness grounded in real psychological understanding rather than superstition or empty promise. Jung spent much of his career taking seriously the genuine connection between inner psychological development and meaningful external life circumstance. His work does not offer a literal, precise countdown to a specific romantic arrival. It offers something more valuable, a genuine framework for understanding why becoming whole within yourself so often coincides with becoming capable of genuine, mature, lasting love with another whole individual. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If this message resonated with your own experience, I hope it offered a grounded, genuinely informed perspective on the real psychological connection between inner readiness and meaningful romantic development, rather than an empty, literal promise about a specific arrival time. This has been the Archetype Awakening. I hope this video helped you understand Jung's actual insight into synchronicity, individuation, and romantic readiness, and reminded you that the most meaningful preparation for lasting love is not watching the clock, but continuing the genuine work of becoming whole within yourself. Wishing you continued clarity in your own process of integration, genuine presence with whatever synchronicities and signs arise along the way, and the deep, mature partnership that becomes possible once you approach love from a place of wholeness rather than need. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.